Foundation. And this is a discussion that will be part of the Ukraine 2020 policy dialogue organized by the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation. There was a previous U.S.-Ukraine policy dialogue several years ago funded by the State Department that looked into critical issues facing Ukraine and U.S.-Ukraine relations at that time. Ukraine 2020 policy dialogue might be seen as a follow-on to that previous dialogue, which we hope will advance both the objectives of the bilateral commissions between the two governments and advance President Yanukovych's stated objective of European integration for Ukraine. As in the previous dialogue, Ukraine 2020 will be divided up into issue area task forces, business, economics, foreign policy, and so forth. Today we're focusing on the task force on democracy and governance. And we have with us our two U.S. co-chairs. There will be a Ukrainian co-chair announced soon. But we look forward today to looking to our two U.S. co-chairs for their initial thoughts on what this task force might be looking at and considering as we move forward. I must say in that context, and I've mentioned this to our co-chairs before we started today, I found quite curious former President Kuchma's statement very recently of things that he thinks reflect on recent past in Ukraine. But first, I want to introduce our co-chairs. Nadia Diuk is Vice President Program for European, Eurasia, Africa, Latin America, Caribbean for the National Endowment for Democracy. And for over 20 years before being appointed as Vice President, Nadia was supervising programs for NED in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. And prior to that, prior to going with the NED, she taught Soviet politics at Oxford University, was a research associate at the Society for Central Asian Studies in the United Kingdom, and editor-in-chief of the London-based publication Soviet Nationality Survey. David Kramer has a distinguished career both in government and in the private sector. He served as Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy and Human Rights and Labor from early 2008 through January of 2009, and previously served for 3 years as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, focusing on Russia, Moldova, Belarus, and Ukraine, and non-proliferation issues in the region. In the private sector, his experience includes his current position as Senior Transatlantic Fellow at the German Marshall Fund, as well as a 5-year tenure at the Carnegie Endowment, where he was Associate Director of Russian and Eurasians Program. So, with the introductions, it's on to Ukraine 2020 and the issues for the Democracy and Governance Task Force.